Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today's subject is going to be making the world into a beautiful gem. Well, this is an interesting idea that we're going to bring out today, and a very outstanding concept, and many people ask me about, and I'm sure you're interested also. And the idea is, what does Judaism think of the non-Jews? Now, this is an interesting concept because people do consider the Jewish people, I'd say, a little bit of a clan, their own people. And do remember that, of course, the Jewish people, even though they consist of, let's say, about 6 million people in America, which is about 3%, even less, and really in the world population, 1/3 of 1% of the world, nevertheless, that they do have an outstanding effect on the world population, as we see the Jewish influence is so great. And that is in many of the sciences and many of the histories. But remember this, that Judaism, of course, stands and remains as one of the major religions of the world. And so everybody who comes from Christianity and Islam, actually, obviously the religion is started and rooted in Judaism. Now, what does Judaism consider about all obviously the great majority of the world, the non-Jewish population? Should you say that if you're non-Jewish, something's wrong with you, you have to be Jewish? Well, it's very interesting to note, and many people don't know this, and that's what I'm, of course, here to inform everybody, is that the Jewish people, really it's Judaism, of course, that's what Jewish people hold by, has a very liberal and humane outlook on the non-Jewish population of the world. And suffice it to say, let's say that it is in contrast to others religions comparative to their, like I say, their non-neighbor, their other non-Christian neighbors, non-Islam neighbors, what the dogmatic religions hold by. What does Judaism actually say? Judaism doesn't say, for example, you're doing anything wrong by being non-Jewish. Let's go to basic number one. So if there is nothing wrong being non-Jewish, what does Judaism want the non-Jewish person to be or to behave? Now, this is a very interesting concept in Judaism. It's called the 7 mitzvahs, or the 7 commandments of Bnei Noach, the Noahide laws. Now, we all know the story about Noah, that the first man was Adam. Adam was the first man in the world. There was a number of 10 generations. The world got so bad, so immoral, so inhumane, that the world had to be destroyed. The Almighty had to start all over again. And he did start all over again with Noah. But he learned his lesson, so to speak, the Almighty, and then he said that, listen, that this world was reckless before Noah. Like I said, there's no rules, no laws. If you can imagine that. There's no society. People were evil, that they were evil in a moral sense, in an ethical sense, and they're immoral in any religious sense also, which goes really hand in hand. So, somebody says, now we're going to bring out 7 major laws to the Noahide laws. That's why they're called Noahide, for calling to Noah. And these are, and I'm going to be reading a little bit excerpts from a pamphlet. It's called, like I said at the beginning of the show, Making the World into a Beautiful Gem. It's actually put out from the Diamond Center in Israel. It is in English, and if I forget to announce that any person wants a pamphlet for themselves, then they can just give me a ring or write me a letter at the end of which is shown at the end of the show, and that would be more than happy to get one over to you. There are a few if you want to give them to the friends. It's just the Diamond Center has made this pamphlet, and they just compare it to the world like a diamond. And diamond's a very interesting example. In many cases, we'll only bring out the one thing here also, that the diamond itself has to be perfected. If you give a wrong knock, if you form it the wrong way, it turns a precious diamond or a gem into a piece of junk. And in a way, that's what they compared the world also. The world, in a way, is like a diamond. It's very genteel. It's very accurate in many senses of the word. And if you're going to treat the world the wrong way, then ultimately, God forbid, the world's going to turn into a piece of junk. But if you treat it the right way, and you tune it in the right way, and you act with the world the right way, and as human beings, we're the people who can really have a choice in the effect. A dog's going to be a dog no matter what they do. The sun's going to shine no matter what it does. But the human being, of course, has their choice to to treat the world, like I say, a little bit off kilter and make it into a problem, or complement the world and making a better place to be. Therefore, the diamond people saw that this was actually a good example of how the world is compared to a diamond. And if we would just act right and just hit the diamond on the right way, or act in the world in the right direction, then we'll make the world into a gem instead, like I say, instead of destroying this world. Now, number one, let's go back, take it step by step. Number one, that this is what Judaism says about that the non-Jew, the code of the non-Jews. Now, just keep also in mind, let me just finish off that idea, is that it says in the Maimonides, who's actually the biggest, one of the biggest scholars, if not the biggest scholar in Judaism. So you can't have any bigger authority than that. And he says clear, he states and codifies clear as a bell, that if a non-Jew keeps these 7 laws that we're going to say, he assures that non-Jew of a place in the Olam Haba, or the next world. He calls actually a mechosid, actually a pious person, and gets the next world. And like I say before, you're not going to see that being Jewish or any of the Jewish practices part of these 7 laws, because, again, as we said before, it's very humane. Every person has their function in the world. We're not all the same. I mean, we all have the same vote and democratic, but we are individuals. Men are men, women are women, and people are coming around to seeing that also. It doesn't mean that we have to have different rights in that sense, and like I say, we have different votes, but in a certain sense that the people are individuals. There is a common denominator. We are all human beings. There's many common denominators in many parts of life, but on the other hand, there's many things that we are very individually different. You say men and women, for example, are different, have their different functions. And we could also say about Jews and non-Jews. And when we say people are different, again, that doesn't mean superior or inferior, and that's not at all the connotation that we're trying to say. That we're trying to say that different but equal. And that's, like we say, in many issues, and we can't get into that here, but we've devoted many shows, we'll have to talk about it in many other shows, the role of women in Judaism, which, again, many people feel have the wrong connotation that they are women are second class citizens in Judaism. It's totally false, totally wrong. But what Judaism does say, we are different, and we do have different functions, but we're equal. It's like a jigsaw puzzle. If every part is different, but if you interlock all the different pieces, you get one beautiful picture. And that's the way the world is simply also. That if every piece is a piece in the world, and every piece is important, or if there's one piece missing, you're going to have a hole, like, say, in the jigsaw puzzle. So too in the world. If any part is missing, there's something going to be wrong. On the other hand, we aren't all the same. We have to know who we are and what we are and how we fit into the greater scheme of things. So therefore, this is what Judaism says about the non-Jews. It doesn't make, not everybody has to be Jewish, not everybody has to be non-Jewish. The Jewish people should be good Jewish people, non-Jewish people should be non-Jewish, good non-Jews and Gentiles, and the 7 laws that we're just about trying to start. And therefore, it'll be a happy and a beautiful world for everybody. Again, like the diamond. If everybody works in the world and is synchronized into what we're supposed to do, then the world will be better off. And the problems are not from the Almighty. People say, oh, there's problems here and there's problems there. It's not because of the Almighty. It's because of people. We have our free choice, and you make your own life, and you make your own world the way you want to make it. You have the good raw material, as I think everybody could see. It's a beautiful world. But like we say, that it's in hands of the human beings to destroy it, or hopefully make it actually a better world and a more humane world for everybody to live in. So without further ado, let's just start with those 7 laws that are so important. Now, number 1 is belief in God, do not worship idols. And I'm reading from the text. Man, the weakest of creatures, is surrounded by forces of life and death far greater than himself. Confronted with the vastness of these universal forces, man might well try to serve them in order to protect himself and better his lot. Let me interject here. This is not from the context, but that's what you have me as a teacher to explain things to you and what's happening. That the world, for example, is like the major idols with the sun and the moon and the constellations, and they are greater than a person. How can you compare yourself to the sun or any of the constellations or the planets? It's ridiculous. So therefore, and they do, the sun and the moon and the rain, obviously give us our life. I mean, maybe we're not farmers today. Of course, if we'd be farmers, feel more dependent on the natural weather scheme. And now today we just worry about if the stores are going to be open when we're ready to shop. But of course, even if you do shop, everybody does shop in a store. Obviously, the food comes from the elements. And if there's droughts, all the science in the world can't do anything about a drought or a flood. That's something that we're all dependent on. So therefore, that's what he's saying, that in the olden times, people could say, maybe, I need the sun, I need the moon, I need the rain. Let me serve these natural forces, because this way, if I serve them, if I pray to them, well, then they'll do me a good turn and give me what I need. But the essence of life, however, is to recognize the supreme being who created the universe, to believe in him and accept his laws with awe and love. We must remember that he is aware of all our deeds, rewarding goodness and punishing evil. We are dependent on him, and to him alone do we owe allegiance. To imagine that there could be any other power that could protect us or provide for our needs is not only foolish, but perverts the purpose of life, and as history has shown, potentially unleashes untold forces of evil in ourselves and in the world. So, of course, this is number one, the belief in God. Let me give you an example of what it is. That we are in a, let's say, in a tinsel world in a certain sense. I mean, it's a real world, but we don't see through things. You have to be a little bit smart and have perception to see the real forces behind the world. Let's say, for example, that you saw a lumberjack knocking down a tree. Well, who knocked down the tree? In actuality, the lumberjack maybe never even touched the tree. It was the axe that cut down the tree. So when you see the tree get cut down in full and say, wow, that's a good axe. It's a good axe. He cut down the tree. Again, that's obviously ridiculous to anybody to see that, because they know it's, well, maybe the axe is the one that actually touched the tree and actually cut down the tree. On the other hand, we all know it wasn't the axe that knocked down the tree. It was the lumberjack, the person behind the axe, that knocked down the tree. And that's exactly the same thing that's happening in the world. What we see, maybe we only, that's what I'm saying, we don't see a normal situation. You see a lumberjack and an axe. Nowadays, maybe you see only the sun and the moon and the rain and just only the actual things that give us our food or give us our life. So we say, ooh, that may be the main thing, the sun and the moon, the rain and all the constellations. They are the things that are giving us our life. We have to say no, that we have to know that there's a force, and it only makes sense that there is a force controlling these things. The sun and moon cannot just go around. Something had to create them. Something has to be leading them and conducting even today. So therefore, that's what we have to understand, that there is a force behind all the natural forces in the world. And we proceed to 2. Respect God and praise him. Do not blaspheme his name. When we feel disappointed with life, when things do not work out as they should, how easy it is to point an accusing finger and blame everyone, everything, even God. Loyalty and trust are crucial in life. To blame God, curse, or to curse others in his name is an act of disloyalty akin to treason. It is an act which undermines the basis of all order and stability of which a just society must stand. Again, everybody has problems. I've never met a human being that doesn't have problems or difficulties in their life. But of course, we have to understand who's in charge of the world, and there is someone in charge of the world, and we can't just buck and be angry at them. For example, I'll give you a simple example, which again you can all relate to. That when a child has to take a bath, many times the children don't like taking baths, and they're screaming and they're yelling. Someone would come into the house, they would just say, oh, what's this? You're torturing your child, you're punishing your child. The child is screaming bloody murder. He said, what kind of business? What's happening? Well, I just told my child he's got to take a bath. He's dirty. He can't be dirty. What kind of business is this? He says that he's got to take a bath. So we see that different people have different perceptions. Now, we all know, of course, hopefully, that it was the best thing in the world for this parent to tell their child, take a bath. This is the best thing. I'd cheer a child, if it's the best thing, they should be dancing and happy. The parents taking care of their child and doing the best thing for them. And instead we see the child screaming and yelling. So again, this is almost an idea for ourselves also. We, in a way, are children because we don't understand. What's the difference between a child and an adult? So wait 5 years, 10 years, the child understand that a normal human being, to be healthy and to be good, has to be clean. And they'll understand it also, and you don't see adults screaming and crying about taking a bath. Because they understand. A little child may not understand. And in a way, that's why I say, well, how are we really different? When we don't see something, and something's a little difficult, something's a little bit painful, well, then maybe we're like the little child, that we don't see what the real good behind it. We don't have to start, like he says, cursing and yelling and screaming and crying. Maybe we should just see the good in it and just try to be above the situation. Number 3, respect human life, and that means do not murder. So far, I just want to bring out to you a little bit. We're in the middle of it, and keep this theme in mind. I don't think anything's too difficult. No one's telling any person to jump off a building or knock their head against the wall or whatever have you, give $1 million. No one's telling anybody these kind of things. But as you see, these things are very much an opportunity of every human being. And I don't know how many people disagree with them. With one time, the Chabad movement, and we tried to not only better Jewish life, but like we're doing now, is trying to better human life. We came to a mayor of one town and said maybe make a resolution just that may become more official. And he read, well, he says, let's see what you have here. What are you connotating? So we looked through it as we're doing exactly right now. It's very difficult, he says, to disagree with any of these. And that's why I say also, that's what I'm saying, I think in one sense every person at least it could admit to these things that these are the right things. No one would want to worship an idol or blaspheme God or, like I'm saying now, do not murder. I don't think there's too many human beings that are going to sit here and disagree with any of these 7 principles. So in one sense, they're very easy if the people would just be directed and educated that these are the right things and not being told you do what you want and just can act any way you want. There has to be a set of goals, and people are essentially good, but they do have to be trained and they do have to be educated, and of course that's what we're doing now. 3, respect human life, do not murder. The record of man's inhumanity to man begins with the story of Cain and Abel. Man is indeed his brother's keeper. The prohibition against manslaughter, including abortion, comes to protect man from the bestial tendency which lies within him. Man, the attacker, denies the sanctity of human life and ultimately attacks God who creates us in his image. We are not... Now, a person who comes in the street and takes an automatic machine gun and kills someone in the street, I don't know how many people, and even in prisons, that do other things would say that's proper behavior. So I'm going to safely say that 99.9% of human beings will say that taking a machine gun and killing somebody, that's just a wrong thing to do. But on the other hand, there are certain types of murder in our society that people are thinking that it is proper. Suicide machines, for example. Now, I know what people say, and I, of course, am a rabbi, and I visit people in the hospitals probably more than most people except for doctors do. And I would simply say that I also understand how grievous it is for a person to be suffering from an illness. On the other hand, and this is the big other hand, that a person has to understand that we are not in charge of life and death. We are, just like I say, servants of God. We have the right to heal. Yes, it does say that, and a person should do as much as they can to help a person heal and be better off and healthy. On the other hand, we are not in charge of determining who's in life and death. And I'll just, even if it sounds half cruel, let me explain even another parable to you. The Nazis in the Holocaust actually started, and there's a famous book out, and you can read it yourself. It's called The Nazi Doctors. Meaning, as we all know, again, history, that the Germans thought they were the master race. Therefore, anybody who was handicapped, mentally retarded, or whatever have you, that they said they weren't fit to live. So, well, I mean, I don't know if you would agree with that or half agree with that. If a person is totally handicapped, then you would also maybe agree with it. It sounds maybe nice at first step. Just like saying a person's comatose in their hospital bed. What good are they? They're just suffering. Better to put them to death. Well, as we all see, and we have surely 100% hindsight, 20/20 hindsight in looking, the Nazis doctors, sure, first of all, maybe you'd even have to agree with them. Someone who's totally mentally retarded, brain damaged, handicapped. Maybe some people out there saying, no, maybe they should really be killed because you're doing them a favor. What kind of life is it? But we see the next step is, well, I don't like those kind of people, I don't like the Jews, and I don't like the gypsies, and I don't like the communists, and I don't like this kind of people, and I'll kill them. Just like I killed the handicapped people, I don't think they were fit to live, I don't like other people. So we see, and this is not, I'm not talking anything about theory here, because we do have 20/20 hindsight about this, is that once we play God, and we're saying this person's not fit to live, and that person's not fit to live, and I'm not even going to disagree with you that it's not a kind of life. I'm not going to say someone should remain comatose, and I think that's humane. All I'm saying is I'm not in charge of that person who's life and death. And therefore, I'm also not in charge of anybody if I don't like them or whatever have you, that I think, well, I'm going to start saying that they should die either. It's not my business as a human being, and this is what we're saying here. It's not really anybody's business as a human being to decide who should live and who should die. Number 4, respect the family. Do not commit immoral sexual acts. The Bible states it is not good for man to be alone. So the Almighty made a helpmate for Adam, and in marriage, He blessed them. In a wholesome family, man's creativity finds meaningful expression. Wholesome families are the cornerstone of healthy communities, nations, and societies. Nations which have condoned immorality, adultery, homosexuality, sodomy, incest have never lasted long. Sexual immorality is a sign of an inner decay which spawns a ruthless society, bringing confusion into God's life plan. Now, this is interesting, and of course, people can know that it's obviously I'm going to say it's a problem in America. I don't know how you feel about this over here. It's a situation in America, all these different ideas. But again, trying to be objective about these and sitting back and not looking at what you personally feel, that you have to look at societies. And the ruin of society is not because they make less cars in Detroit. It's not because even that they make less bullets or whatever have you. If you look at a historical perspective, the breakdown of society is the morality of that society. And if, again, we have 20/20 hindsight, we don't have to talk theory, that we're talking about the rise and fall of the Roman Empire. Anybody wants to read that book again is more than welcome. Have you look at it objectively. It wasn't because the Romans were beat because of military might. That's not why they fell apart. I mean, it was only afterwards, after the fact that they started decaying, and then enemies came and finally destroyed them. But that wasn't the first, that they were a whole society and then they were destroyed militarily. They were destroyed from within. They decayed in the moral fabric of their society. That's what eventually led to the breakdown of their whole empire. And I don't know if we can say that, but maybe I'll go out on a limb and saying that's a little bit what's happening in America also. It's not the Japanese economy that are hurting us, and it's not the Arab oil that would be hurting us. It's not any of these outside forces. The only thing that would destroy America is ourselves, the decay of our own selves and our own lives. That we need a strong society. We need a strong, not I'm talking with machine guns strong, I'm talking strong morally. And if we have a strong moral society and we have the courage of our moral convictions, then everything else will fall into place. Number 5, respect for others, rights, and property. Do not steal. Since our sustenance comes from God, we should seek to earn it honestly, with dignity, and not through false means. To violate the property of others by robbing or cheating is a fundamental attack on their humanity. This breeds anarchy, plunging mankind in the depths of selfishness and cruelty. It was for this sin above all that the flood was brought upon the world. Well, this is very interesting, to say the least, because stealing, again, if we sit back and I just consider it, and I think most people do, the society, people are generally moral in stealing. But again, people slip up and they can give it a fancier name like ripping off, and that they can talk about just cheating on different things on different people and say, well, I'm not a bank robber. Again, I think 99% of people would say don't be a bank robber. But on the other hand, a person has to understand that if they could be honest and moral in their dealings and financially, then they actually are going to be ahead of the game also. Ultimately, it's not how much money you make, it's how you use it. You want to use that on healthy things, on good things, on blessed things, and therefore you have to have your money coming in a good way, in a clean way also. 6, creation of a judicial system, pursue justice. A robust and healthy legal system administering justice fairly creates a society worthy of God's blessing. Establishing a system of judges, courts, and officials to maintain and enforce the law is a far-reaching responsibility. This precept translates the ideal of our personal life into a formal order for society at large. It is the extension and guarantee of all the preceding laws. Well, this is very important. I just want to say about, of course, we do have system in courts, and obviously we have a big court system, but remember that the court system has to be just also. We want to be sure that everybody gets their fair shake in the penal system, and it's got to be fair. And of course, our court system and police system is in place, but we sure want it to work for everybody. And if it's fair and it's moral and they're giving out right justice, then even, I think, the immoral people, the people who lose the justice, respect the judicial system also. And that they say, well, I got a fair shake, and I know that I was wrong, and maybe there'll be better people afterwards. And everybody will have respect for that society. And number 7, respect all creatures. Do not eat the flesh of an animal while it's still alive. Now, of course, there are laws that really, of course, Jewish people have to hold by also, but in many laws this is a kosher law. Well, maybe, for example, people know that Jewish people don't eat pig. We're not asking that. But here it is, do not eat the flesh of an animal while it is still alive. God gives man dominion over the fish of the sea, the fowl of the heaven, over the cattle, and over all of the earth. We are the caretakers of God's creation. Ultimately, our responsibility extends beyond our family, even beyond society, to include the world of nature. Eating meat so fresh that the animal is still alive may be healthy, but it is cruel, even barbaric, displaying a decadent insensitivity to the pain of others. This law is the touchstone, if you will, that measures how well the other 6 laws are being observed. When man fulfills his potential, the whole of creation is nurtured and elevated to realize its goal, to transform the world into a beautiful gem, a place where God can dwell. Well, this is obviously an idea of cruelty, taking off, and again, I mean, most people don't do it, obviously, when you eat your chicken in your store or whatever have you. It's not living. But there were other times in society that people were cruel to their animals, and they would just take a piece of meat off a leg, chop off a leg off an animal. Sounds sick and gross, but in any case, other societies did it, and it's not allowed, and they would eat that, let's say, like a part of the animal, and not and let it live. So that isn't allowed, and that's considers us, like we say, that we can't be cruel and, like he says here, and barbaric, and that's the cornerstone of society. And really, like I say, and now we're done with all 7, and I'd like to reiterate also, I mean, sitting objectively at home, I know that people mess up, maybe commit immoral sexual acts here and there, maybe they steal, they rip off here and there, certain things are wrong, but in any case, I think that anybody could sit back and objectively say that these 7 laws are very moral, very right, and like that person said, that mayor told me also, he said that it's very hard to disagree with these 7 laws, and it's as simple that, and there is a bottom line to it all, that I said by the Rambam, that if people would keep these 7 laws, and think about a society, imagine a society that would keep all these 7 laws, that they would have respect for others, that they would have a belief in God, at least, a bottom line. Wouldn't many of our problems in society, many times when I hear what should we do about the crime and punishment and the different problems in society, wouldn't these simple 7 laws take care of the majority of problems? Wouldn't there be less immoral acts in society? Wouldn't there be less of a cruelty to others? Maybe you could walk down the streets. Crime is the #1 problem in America today. That's what people consider as the biggest one problem. Wouldn't that be taken care of? That people would help each other and would respect each other and surely not hurt each other? This is the bottom line, what people want from their lives, and this is what they want from a society. And even though it's a little tricky that these 7 laws don't seem to be too big and too difficult, and that's a good thing, at least you can agree with them. On the other hand, we just want to say officially and legally that these legally, a Jewish legal system, that if every person kept these laws, the world would be better off. They surely would be get the next world spiritually, but we don't have to even wait for that. In this world, in this society, today, in our everyday life, we'd have a beautiful and the right life, and hopefully we should all see it. Thank you very much. Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today our show will focus in on the idea of tzedakah, which is the Hebrew word for charity. Now we're going to explain different levels of charity. It's not so simple just to say give charity. Of course, we could always assume you need to give something the needy person, a person who doesn't have a bite to eat, and you give them a sandwich. Well, that's charity. But it's not so simple as that, and we will explain it further on. Let me introduce this idea because in many times we say, and people know this, that when you translate from one language to another, you lose something in the translation. It's also with our idea today. Tzedakah, as we translated charity, really comes from the Hebrew word tzedek, which means righteousness, which is right, meaning there's a little bit of a different connotation. It's fine difference, but it's a marked difference in any case. Meaning that the idea of charity means I have for myself, it is mine, I own it. All right, I see a poor man in the street or some institution that needs charity, fine and good. All right, it's only right. I have a home, I have a car, I have this, I have that. They should have something also. Give that person a piece of bread to eat. But by Judaism, when we say tzedek, it means it's only right. A person believes what I have, all right, hopefully you worked for it, you didn't steal it, you worked for it, you went to school to get a degree, for example, and that's why you have a better job, and which means you have better pay. So you put out the effort to get that, to get those dollars into your pocket and for this nice home, this nice car that you have. Well, surely you did work and you did earn it. On the other hand, though, nothing we understand in Judaism can come without the help from above. Meaning, so you did put your effort, you went through college, and you went through 9 to 5 or whatever your hours of the day are to go to work. Yes, and you wouldn't have had the money if you would have slept during college or if you wouldn't go into work today, you wouldn't have gotten anything. You did have your effort put into it. On the other hand, just who gave you the power to give that effort? Who was able to help you go through college? Who gave you just even basically your life, your health, your energy? Who gave you the ability to be smarter to go through college and not be a dropout like someone else? Who gave you the ability to be a good and aware in business or whatever job you are in? That, of course, is from above. So therefore, when you see another person, the attitude isn't, well, I made it, I'm smart, I have the money, he's dumb, he's stupid, he doesn't have money. Okay. I'll give him a few dollars, give him a sandwich, whatever have you. I'll help that poor guy out. That's not the right attitude. The attitude, he has his circumstances, and we don't deal with something's wrong with that other person. He has unfortunate circumstances. We don't know why. We talked about that before. We don't know why poor people is poor and sick people are sick. That's not in our realm to know. But we could judge a person favorably and say, well, it's not his fault. Who knows? A recession nowadays, of course, is always a reason. It's not his fault he was laid off from work. Whatever have you, there's different excuses we can give to the other person. For myself, I know that I only had what I have with the help from above. So it's only tzedek again. It's only right that I should help that other person out. It's not just, so to speak, charity. Well, I'll have mercy and pity on the person, give him charity. It's only right that I help him out. God deals with that person the way he does, and from above they deal with me the way I do. It's only right that we help each other out. That is an introduction to charity. Of course, I have always a stock of a million stories I like telling, and people like listening, hopefully, and therefore I have another little idea of a story, and this goes hand in hand with charity, and it just shows, which I said before, a person said, well, I have a nice home, I have a car, and therefore I'll help the person out with something. So this person comes to this famous rabbi, is a Mizritcher Maggid by name, and he comes and he says to him, I decided to serve the Almighty better. And he was a rich man. Instead of eating so much and taking care of all my comforts, I'm going to deny myself. I'm going to be an ascetic a little bit, and I'm only going to eat bread and water. This way I'll be a little bit more spiritual. So comes the Mr. Maggid and says, no. For you should eat a good meal. Should have whatever the rich people eat. This is what you should have, a nice meal and meat and the side dish and 6-course dinner. You have a good meal. So after this, the rabbi's students came to him. Says, we don't understand. Really, it's a good, very meritorious idea. The person should deny them. He doesn't have to. You don't have to have everything. Indulge yourself. Person is coming to you already and asking to be a little bit aesthetic. Why don't you let him do what he wants to do? Why did you deny him and saying, hey, you should eat a big meal? What's the big deal in having? Why should the person tell the person to eat a lot, to have a good meal? And the rabbi was smarter, and he said to him like this. He says, this rich man, he says, will have a beautiful, like we said, 6-course meal. Then a poor man will come to his door. No, he'll say that for that person he can have, give him a few pieces of bread and water, at least something he can eat. But if this rich man himself is eating the bread and the water, what's he going to tell the poor man? You could eat rocks. Well, of course, that's the idea here, that of course we're not at the full level of charity, which leads us to our next idea, different levels of charity, but hopefully we at least have some compassion on other people and understand that it's not just because of our efforts and our greatness that we've come to any great level, but it's only with the help from above, and that person's unfortunate with his circumstances, and they need a little bit more, so it's only right to help them out. Now we have an interesting chart here, and I refer you to our chart. And we're going to look here at the Maimonides' 8 degrees of tzedakah. Again, tzedakah is the Hebrew word for charity. And we're going to start on the bottom because these are rungs on a ladder. And you start, of course, on the bottom rung of a ladder, and you will step by step go up. Now, with a charity, then this is why I introduced the show as saying that when a person gives charity, that it's not so simple. We could always say you give to a poor man. Of course, that is charity. On the other hand, there's ways of giving. Now, the Gemara does say, it's very interesting, the Talmud says that a person is blessed with 6 blessings when they give charity. But that's when you give to somebody. But when you actually, that you should console the other person, you say, all right, I know you're out of a job, it's a recession, I know things will turn around, the economy will get better, and I'm sure you'll get a good job, and this way you give the person a little bit of hope. He's blessed with 11 blessings, which this comes to show us it's not just how many dollar bills or what kind of check that you give out for charity. There's also ways of giving charity. And remember that once I say amount of dollars, that's also important. Just because a person, he may give $1 million, so he's worth $100 million, and he writes it off his taxes. Well, it's very fine and good that he does that at least. But obviously, a person who only has $100 and he gives a few dollars, and he has to deny himself maybe a good meal or with something that he needs. That, of course, that we can't judge, and anyway, we're not judges of anybody. There's only one judge in the world from above, and the Almighty, and therefore we're not in a position to judge. But you should know in your heart, and we should all know it's just a matter of, like again, it's the quality. It's not so much the quantity of giving. So without further ado, I'll take you through the 8 rungs of charity according to the Maimonides, and then we're going to tell a little bit more about the Maimonides, who he was, but let's start with the chart because we're dealing with charity. On the bottom rung, first rung, number 1, a person gives but is glum when giving. This is the lowest degree of all. And this is what we just said before, that a person gives, and all right, you gave. We can't deny you that you get the mitzvah commandment, the good deed of giving charity, but what kind of, hopefully everybody is fortunate enough to have money. But when a person is on the receiving end, how do you think that person feels? Here's $1, now get out of here, or something like that. Of course, he's got the dollar in his hand. He doesn't feel good about it, and therefore that's the lowest rung. You get the credit for giving, just that's about it. You don't get really the credit for making the person feel good about himself. We're going up the next notch to 2, and obviously I think you'll be able to see how each one's a higher level, but we'll take you through them too. A person gives cheerfully, but gives less than he should. So being cheerful is important and puts him up to the second level of giving charity. And everybody likes a cheerful person, but you say, okay, here's a quarter. Now, you know the person could give more, but if they only give a quarter, that doesn't make him so great on a high level. But it's above 2 is above 1 because at least that person gave cheerfully, it at least makes you feel good the way you're giving. We're up to number 3. A person gives, but only when asked by the poor. You see in the picture that the person's begging on his knees. Again, that's a nice way of a person gives, maybe gives cheerfully, but the person had to come begging for that person. Actually, I know people, of course, we collect charity for poor people, of course. It's part of the clergy's job, but then it's the big mitzvah, of course. But besides that, there are other big charity funds, and I know people who are in charge of these funds. And it's interesting to note that that person says it's not the hardest job is to collecting money, which is hard enough, of course. But he says, you know, the hardest thing of all is to knowing who really is worthy of receiving the charity. Now that sounds a little funny to you if you haven't dealt with charitable cases, but if you think about it, and if you don't know about it, well, then I'm informing you of it. Many people want charity, and maybe they are deserving, maybe they aren't deserving of it, or as deserving, but sometimes hard. Some humble people will not ask for charity. And very hard to deal with these people and find them out and dig them up. The people are really deserving of charity, but of course that some people do come begging for it. But that's why at the 3rd rung it's a low rung, because you have to wait. First of all, you're waiting for a person to get the charity. It'd be better if you go over to that person and find out who really needs, or you hear about somebody that really needs, and give them the charity. We're up to number 4. A person gives without having to be asked, which is, of course, higher than level number 3, because a person doesn't have to sit there and be asked, but they know themselves that they have to give charity. Gives directly to the poor. Now, so what's the problem with that, giving direct? Now the poor know who gave them help, and the giver, too, knows whom he has benefited. Now we're going to deal with, we're on a 4th rung, which the next few rungs is going to deal with, is about embarrassing people. Well, of course, we're not saying that a person should insult the poor person. Of course, that's surely not allowed. You don't say this person, you low life, you slob, you can't work. That's surely not allowed. No one's talking about that. But even if you give cheerfully, again, it's a very humbling experience to receive charity. And it's not an easy job. And sometimes we can scoff people, oh, they're a bunch of moochers, whatever have you. Again, most people are in circumstances, they can't help themselves. They're not evil people, they're not wicked people that receive charity. They're down on their luck, as we said, and they lost a job or whatever happened. Different circumstances happen to different people. I'm not just talking from theory, like I say, we deal with many poor people, unfortunate people, and you can't just go around blaming people. Many times, and it's unfortunate, divorce rate is high. You have single parents, and the mothers can't work because they have little children at home. And these people are not wicked people in any sense. Again, unfortunate, they got divorced. It's a problem in today's society, as we talk about many times. But obviously, these people deserve help. I mean, they need help, and they surely should get help. And they aren't wicked people. They're not moochers and lowlifes just because they need the help. So therefore, it is an embarrassing situation. A person needs help. Hopefully you didn't experience that ever in your life, but a little imagination, you can understand how it is a very embarrassing situation for a person to receive charity. So therefore, even if a person gives the money, even if they find out we're on the 4th rung, they give cheerfully, and they give the right amount, and they sought out that charitable person. They didn't have to wait for him to beg on their hands and knees. Still, it's an embarrassing situation for the poor person to get money from someone else, and that's why they're only up to 4th rung. That brings us up to see what is more correct, more honorable, is number 5. A person gives his donation in a certain place and then turns his back, so he does not know which of the poor person he has helped. But the poor person knows to whom he is indebted. Well, we're getting up in the ranks, of course, so we only need 8th, and we're 5th, so this is a higher level, that the poor person gives, but the poor person knows, the rich person gives, the poor person knows who gave it. Like we have a little bit in our picture, the rich person's not looking at the poor person. Now, a little bit it's embarrassing for the poor person because he still has to know who he's giving to. There's a story in the Talmud that one rabbi slung not like a hobo, but slung a little package over a knapsack, so to speak. Let's use it that way. It's not exactly clear what it is. On his back. And the poor people knew who to take their money, that they knew that person is a charitable person. They could come and take their money out of that sack. Well, this would be the same thing. The rich man or the charity person giver wouldn't know who exactly he's giving to, but the poor person knew who he's getting it from, and that's still, again, embarrassing a little bit to the recipient. So that brings us up to number 6. A person throws the money into the house of someone who is poor. The poor person does not know whom he has intended, but the donor knows whom he has helped. So therefore, this is like from the giver point of view, a person can feel good, oh, I helped that poor person out. And therefore, since there's still some ulterior motives, there's still some good feeling in it, he can sit back and say, I really helped that guy out. I know who he helped. There, I bet you he's sitting down at a nice meal because of me. Therefore, it's a high level. I mean, we're up to number 6. There's nothing wrong with that. But it's ultimately not the ultimate best because a person's feeling still good about himself. It's not the pure mitzvah. A person does a good deed, a mitzvah. Of course, it's nice to feel good about it. And like we say, any good deed, there's no punishment involved and it's not torture. No one's asking anybody to knock their head against a wall. That is not a mitzvah. But it is a mitzvah to give charity, but ultimately we don't want so much of a person that when you do it because it's the right thing to do. It's not because I feel good about it. If you do feel good about it, better you should feel good about it and then not do anything. But the highest and purest level is if you do it because it's the right thing to do without any ulterior motive of feeling good about it. But still on a high level, that's 6 out of 8. We're up to number 7 now. A person contributes anonymously to the tzedakah charity fund, which is then distributed to the poor. Here, the person does not know to whom he is indebted, and the donor does not know whom he has helped. Well, you have in this little picture of number 7, little girl or a woman, whatever, giving into a charity box. Now, the charity box, of course, when the gabbai is called in Hebrew, the person who is in charge of the charity fund, will distribute the funds. Well, you don't know at all who the money is going to. You don't know the per people in charge that are being given. You don't know, only the gabbai who's in charge really knows who he's giving it out to. So that on your part, you feel good, well, I'm doing the right thing, the money's going to a good cause, and hopefully the person who's distributing the charity is a truthful and faithful person that's given it to the right people and doing the right thing with the money. And that is, of course, very important in that sense, so that that person knows that he's not, that he's giving to the right thing, he's giving to right charity. There's always problems that way. A person should know that the people in charge of the charity fund are giving it to the right places, and that's important. Now, and also, though, the person can't have really any real good feeling. Oh, I know that person, Mr. X down the road, is now eating a good meal when they just lost a job and there's no money for their kids or whatever have you. So therefore, that's more of a pure act of giving, and that's why it's all the way up to number 7. Now, number 8, and all so far we've been giving. Give it cheerfully, give enough, don't wait for the person to come begging, giving anonymously. Now we're up to the 8th and highest rung, and this is a shocker. If you haven't saw the picture beforehand, before I tune you into it, and then read it to you of what the picture 8 is. Now this, remember, is the highest level of giving charity. Highest of all is when money is given is a present to another for preventing the poor, such as providing him with a job or lending him money to tide him over for a difficult time. There is no tzedakah, again, charity, greater than this because it prevents poverty happening in the first place. Now, this is amazing, but this is the highest level of charity of all. And as our picture shows, you provide a person with a job. Now, isn't this beautiful and interesting that you can give cheerfully or you can give anonymously, but the best way of helping a poor person is getting a job. and providing the funds for what he's found out without relying on the sustenance of other people. This is the greatest of all. And also, he noted also in the chart that a per person gets a loan fund. And we didn't bring this out clearly, and this is another idea, that there are called free loans in Judaism. People should give free loans. A person needs the help. He needs the money for something or another. He needs business. So it's a great, great mitzvah. It's actually a greater mitzvah than giving him out money in the first place. You can imagine why? Now, this is what I'm asking. I'm saying that Judaism considers giving a loan, a free loan, and obviously a loan means by definition that that person the lender has to, the borrower has to pay it back, is greater than a person would give the money outright. And obviously you can give it outright, you don't have to pay it back. So why is that? So again, we're always talking about saving face. That's a very major idea in Judaism. As we saw it in the 8 degrees of charity also. It's not just enough giving. You can't embarrass the person, and you have to give cheerfully. So here also, when you give a loan, a person doesn't say, well, I'm a poor man, I need charity, I'm a moocher, whatever have you. But a person could say, well, I'm paying it back. I just need a little money to get on my feet, start a little business, do something with myself, and then I'm going to be able to pay it back. I'm really not taking charity. So that's so important that a person's saving face by giving these different charities. But the highest level of law is the free loan fund. Because a free loan helps a person get what he's needed, but saving total face when he obviously pays it back and gets up on his feet, hopefully gets a job, does something with himself, and therefore the person feels good about themselves. Well, these are the 8 levels of giving charity that we said by the Rambam, and we really don't have that much chance to get into the Maimonides. The rest of the chart we'll have to get into another time. Talks about the different levels of the different greatnesses of Rambam. The Maimonides has said that. I know I'm just telling you a little bit. We talked about Maimonides before, who was one of the greatest sages of Judaism. And we'll have to, this is why I say it's only a few minutes left to talk about this. We really can't give a full, give justice to the Maimonides by just bringing in his whole biography and his life story in a few minutes. But let me just bring it into the issues for current events. Of course, like we always say, the learning and the talking is not the main thing, it's the doing. Many people need charity. Many people have to be helped out, and there's a recession, it's hard times. But that's also concerning even a bigger picture as the government also. We also see many times that people need handouts, but really, what do people really want? And I think the 99% of people who are even taking charity of some sort or another, either through governmental means or through charitable funds, they really want to just save face and really they want a decent job and a decent life, and they're not just looking there to just, like we say, mooch off the system, because people want to save face. The greatest concept of a human being is that they should work for something and they should get what they worked for, and not just going around getting something for nothing. But saying this on that level, going back to the personal level, people cannot just say, and it's many times it's called in Judaism, this country is a very beautiful country. It's fortunate. I think it's fortunate for every people, and the Jewish people have what to be thankful also to being in the United States of America. It's a very kind country. It's not oppressive in any measure, in any sense of the imagination. People can do what they want, and sometimes that's a fault also. We say people will be stricter with crime and punishment. That's another issue. But the point is that this country is very kind. They give assistance to many ways, through food stamps, WIC, and ADC. Many things that this country is so great in giving charity. This country gives charity even to other countries. Saying all that, it still behooves every person, as an individual, to help out their friend, their neighbor, their person in their community. It actually says, and I know it's an English statement, but it really comes from Judaism, that charity begins at home. Charity begins at home. If there's nobody in your home, then it is the people in your neighborhood. If it's not in the neighborhood, it goes to your city. In the city, then it goes to your country. Not your country, it goes out of the country. and that is just the different levels of who to give to charity to. So even though the country takes care of a lot of people, still, and like we say before, there's no smile on the government checks. A person needs a helping hand, and that's just sometimes even more important, as we see with our charity chart, than actually giving. People want to know, they want to have a good word, and they want to be told it's all right, and things are going to get better, and I'm sure things will turn around for you also. And that's something even more important than actually the giving itself. And that's surely something the government can't do, and that's something that we can do. Every person has a nice smile on their face. Every person can say a nice few words to their neighbor and their friend when things are a person a little down on their luck. And charity doesn't only mean money also, for that matter. Like I say, even if you can't give charity, listening to a person at the time of need, giving them your 5-10 minutes and listening to them. You may not be a psychologist, you may not be a social worker, but that's all right also. A person needs a friend, and a friend is someone who listens. And that's charity too. Time, not everything has to be money. Of course, you can't write it off your taxes as a charitable contribution, but on the other hand, that's sometimes, in a way, sometimes more needed, as we're saying today, than even the money. Because a good friend and someone who listens and someone who cares is something more elevating and something strengthening a person more than actually just a few dollars in their hand. And that's an important thing for us to all remember. And hopefully we learned the 8 levels of giving charity. The Rambam, we'll talk about who this Rambam Maimonides was, the great Jewish scholar and educator and physician that lived about 850 years ago. But let us just keep in mind the 8 different levels of charity that we learned today, and let's try to work on the 8th level. But say if it's like a ladder, you can't just jump to the top first. Start at the first rung and go up, and hopefully everybody learns a little bit about charity, and doing is the main thing. Thank you very much. Shalom. Welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we'll be talking about a subject many people are talking about recently, and that is Christopher Columbus. Of course, we all know our history. Every little child in grammar school knows that Christopher Columbus, if we can say discovered, and that we won't use different nuances and semantics, but he was discovered for the European world, the new continent as we know it. Maybe he didn't know it at that time, but of North America. And lo and behold, here we are today with millions upon hundreds of millions of people strong, developing and culturing what we know as the Western Hemisphere. Now, I'm sure you didn't come to listen to the Jewish View to hear about a basic history lesson, and therefore we won't give you one. Therefore, we are going to talk about something you probably haven't heard about before, and that may be very interesting and intriguing, and that is Christopher Columbus's Jewish roots. Now, you say he's Jewish. Some say he's Italian. Some say he's Spanish. A lot of people really don't know who he is and what he is, and right then, that itself is a little bit of the crack into this story. Why doesn't anybody know where Christopher Columbus really came from? Since he was so famous, and he hasn't been famous just for the last few years, obviously he's been famous for hundreds of years, why aren't everybody know that exactly what the birthplace of Columbus is? Why don't we know more of a biographical or a clear biographical sketch of who he is and what he is? Well, we're going to bring you out a little bit of an excerpt from a new book that's from Jason Aronson Incorporated. It's called just like that, Christopher Columbus's Jewish Root. And then we're going to be very excited to tell you, we're going to give you a excerpt from a part of the diary of someone who was on Columbus's boat. So we'll try to analyze it together. 500 years ago, Christopher Columbus set sail from Spain on a voyage that was destined to change the course of history. Throughout the subsequent centuries, puzzling questions about the explorer's life have remained unanswered, prompting much speculation about his personal background and motives. Who was Christopher Columbus, and what ambition shaped his dreams of finding a route to the east by sailing west? Was he simply the son of a Genoese weaver, bewitched by the sea and the lure of the unknown? Or do the many mysteries surrounding his identity suggest secrets that he was compelled to keep in order to survive in 15th century Europe? In Christopher Columbus's Jewish Roots, Jane Frances Ambler examines the life and times of the discoverer, exploring the theory that Columbus was of Spanish Jewish descent. Ambler writes extensively about the Jews who lived in Spain prior to their expulsion in 1492, and she uses her knowledge of the time period to paint a vivid picture of the personalities, culture, historic events, and political intrigues that influenced Columbus. Ambler presents an impressive collection of evidence to support her position. The fact that Columbus's original family name was Cologne implies a tie to Judaism, Hebraic in origin. It is a name used by many Jews who fled to Italian city-states in order to escape the 1391 massacres in Spanish Catalonia. There is also proof that Columbus spoke and wrote in Castilian, the language of Catalonian Jews, rather than as what should have been his native Italian. Notes dated 1481 in the margins of several of his books, including works by Marco Polo and Pope Pius II, were written in Castilian and Latin. Given that Columbus didn't arrive in Spain until 1484, why was he writing and therefore certainly thinking in Castilian, and where did he become fluent in the language? The author provides further information to justify her conclusions. She recounts the chaos and turmoil engulfing Spain when Columbus arrived there, the horror of war, the fury of the Spanish Inquisition, the devastating circumstances that led to the expulsion of the Jews from a land that they had resided for thousands of years. Why was Columbus's expedition finally granted after 8 years of petitioning the king and queen? What role did Jewish officials high within the Spanish court play in influencing that decision? How did Columbus develop such close relationships with these men, getting sufficient favor to convince them to wield their power on his behalf? And was his persistence and burning desire to sail fueled by the need to find a safe haven for the Jews who were being rent from their homes? Christopher Columbus's Jewish Roots is engrossing, engagingly written contribution to the literature on this well-known explorer. From his family's ancestry, his adventures as a young sailor, and his unsuccessful attempt to convince Portugal's king to sponsor his journey, through his years in Spain, historic voyage, and final days, Jane Frances Ambler uses her expert research to uncover his experiences and motives. In doing so, she brings to life an era long since past, and link Columbus's destiny to the fate of the Jewish people. Jane Frances Ambler comes from a family with traditions of descent from Queen Isabella's personal treasure, Don Isaac Abarbanel. She writes about the history of the Jews in Spain prior to their expulsion in 1492. Well, this is a little bit of an expert of a book, if you're interested in reading it, but it's very interesting in its own right about all these ideas, since everybody's trying to explore the explorer with Christopher Columbus and who he was and what he was, but it doesn't bring out all of the ideas here, and I'm going to bring out a few more on my own, some that I know and I've read about in different ways. But obviously the time sequence is more than, can we say, accidental and happens to be some like circumstantial. 1492, the year Columbus discovered America. 1492, the year of the Spanish Inquisition. Now, it would be fitting for someone who was an explorer, someone who took care of the Jewish people and cared about the Jewish people, to try to find a new haven for the Jewish people. One of the bigger questions is asked, and really they didn't do justice to the whole argument here. Obviously, within a few words, you cannot excerpt an entire book. But why was Christopher Columbus's translator someone who translated into Hebrew? And that translator was the first one off the boat on the land of America. Why do you need Hebrew? Someone in India, which they thought they were going to, India doesn't speak Hebrew. But many times, and again it's postulated, and again all these ideas are theories, but they're fun to play with. I don't know if they really change anything, even if it would be proven, but I can say that's what history is made of. We can look around and see some interesting aspects of it and digging up new ideas. But there were at that time sizable Jewish communities in, let's say, India, China. Nowadays, unfortunately, I don't know if there's any Jews in China, but there were known to be bigger Jewish communities in those days. In India, there are still some Jewish communities, but they were more sizable in a few hundred or 500 years ago. And when Columbus could have, according to this postulation, went around the world and thought, well, here would be a good homeland for the Jewish people. Here would be a place, for example, where we have some kind of roots, we have some kind of beginning, foundation of the Jewish community, and Jewish community will take us in, and then we can at least ship over all the Jewish people that were not wanted in Spain and move them over to China. Well, obviously it never happened because in the way was like we said, North America couldn't go directly into China. So the problem was, of course, is that they couldn't find a homeland for the Jewish people at that time. But lo and behold, let's say about, well, really there were Jewish people all along in the 1600s and even the Revolutionary War and increased, but your major Jewish immigration really started in the late 1800s, middle 1800s we could say. So it took about 300-400 years for the real Jewish immigration after Columbus really to begin. And we reached the zenith of 6 million Jewish people after around between World War I and World War II. And that's another story. With ZPG, zero population growth, there's just probably about 6 million Jewish people now in America. But let's say, like I said before, about that interesting idea of the people who were on the boat. And this is an unusual diary entry, a converso, a little bit Spanish there, a conversation with Christopher Columbus, 5283 in Jewish years, or in modern years, 1523. An entry from the diary of Yosef ben Alevi HaIvri, which means the Jew, known as Luis de Torres, written in Cuba in the New World, on the land awarded to him by His Majesty, 31 years after Christopher Columbus discovered the Indies on the occasion of his 71st birthday. I was born in Cordova, Andalusia, Spain. The details of how my people lived have already been recorded, both their illustrious contributions to this country during the Golden Age, and the tremendous suffering imposed upon them after the Christian reconquest and the Inquisition. My father was a scribe who was privileged to write a Torah scroll during his lifetime. I was also educated to be a scribe, always surrounded by Hebrew books, manuscripts, and Torah commentaries. I was fluent in the Hebrew language, and therefore I was invited to accompany Christopher Columbus as an interpreter on his voyage of discovery. He thought that when he would reach China in the Far East, he would locate the exiled Jews from the 10 lost tribes, and he wanted me to be able to communicate with them. The 3 ships, the Santa Maria, the Nina, and the Pinta, sailed many days and nights until we sighted dry land. According to my calculations, we arrived on Friday afternoon, 2 hours after midday, which on the Jewish calendar was Hoshana Rabbah. Hoshana Rabbah is the additional name given to the 7th day of Sukkot. On this day, worshippers solemnly circled the bimah in the synagogue 7 times, in procession with the Esrog Elula, for it marks the day when the final verdict of forgiveness is sealed following Yom Kippur. After the 7th procession, a bundle of willow branches is beaten on the ground 5 times. 21 days in the month of Tishrei in the year 5235 after creation. Because the memory of that day is so vivid in my mind, I'm completely recording every detail as a chronicle for all future generations. The fateful day, the day of our expulsion from Spain, was Tisha B'Av on the Jewish calendar in the year 5252 or 1492. Now let me just interject with an idea here to fill it in. Tisha B'Av, the 9th day of Av, is the anniversary. It's a very mournful day on the Jewish calendar. Jewish people are supposed to fast an entire 24-hour period. And the reason is, there's a few reasons, but the major reason is that this was the day on the first and second temples in Jerusalem were destroyed. Like I say, one of the few reasons, these were the major reasons, because many tragic events happened on Tisha B'Av. As we know, the Spanish Inquisition happened on Tisha B'Av, and as we know also that the beginning of World War I started on Tisha B'Av, and some people want to say that World War I, it was just actually a preface to World War II. So the whole idea of the Holocaust and World War II was, in a certain sense, an extension of World War I, which started again on Tisha B'Av. He says himself that that day marked the tragedy of the destruction of both holy temples many centuries before, and now one more tragic event was added to that mournful day. 300,000 people, half the amount that were redeemed from Egyptian slavery, descended to the Mediterranean shore searching for passage to a new land, to a land where they could openly practice Judaism. I was among them. However, I was not a refugee. I had been commissioned to join Christopher Columbus's voyage of discovery. I agreed to accompany him because I hoped that if we would found Jewish brethren, I would be able to live my life in peace and in freedom. Don Rodriguez, his uncle Don Gabriel Sanchez, Alonso de Locud, Rodrigo de Triana, Juan Cabrera, Dr. Borena, Dr. Marco all agreed with my reasoning and joined, but except for Rodrigo, they sailed on the other ships. We were a large group of conversos, living in perpetual fear of the Inquisition, hoping that we would find a way out of the precarious situation we were in. We sailed for 72 days. Most of the time the ocean was serene and the trade winds blew gently from east to west. Usually Columbus pored over the navigational diagrams that had been prepared for him by Rabbi Avraham Zacuto, an astronomer and historian who fled from Spain to Portugal when the Jews were expelled. However, some of the time the ocean churned heavy with storm, the waves blasting the sides of our ships till we were sure that they would capsize and we would all drown in the depths. On those frightful times during the nights, Christopher Columbus stood on deck, his eyes searching for the occasional stars that darted in between the cumulus clouds, watching for the appearance of the North Star to measure navigational latitude. He was determined to sail until he reached land, and his rallying call was "Adelante, sail on." We sailed through the month of September, marking the holy days of Rosh Hashanah among ourselves. On the eve of Yom Kippur, which occurred on Sunday night that year, we sighted a magnificent sight. Covered with lush, rich foliage, a sandbank floated in the middle of the ocean. It was our last sighting of land. We had a backwards glimpse of the Canary Islands. The ocean was calm. Towards nightfall, I wrapped myself in my towel, went up on the deck, and chanted the Kol Nidre, the holy service of Yom Kippur. Voices from the Pinta and the Ninya echoed across the water and joined me in prayer. It seemed that the waves responded in rhythm to the sound of our voices. When I finished the Kol Nidre, Columbus called me over to his side. "Isn't the dove one of the symbols of the Jewish people?" he queried. "You know that my family name Colombo also means dove. There must be a reason for this voyage. We are not sailing on this ship in vain. Let me read to you what I wrote here. And it came to pass, on the day that the Jewish people were expelled from Spain at the hands of His Majesty, King Ferdinand, on that day the power was given to me to go forth to search new paths across this dark and fearsome ocean to an old world. We sat quietly side by side until the rays of the eastern lights silvered the horizon. 11 days later, we noticed the first signs that land was not far distant. Sea swallows, long pointed wings, and forked tails swooped gracefully overhead, plunging headlong into the water to catch small fish. I noticed that slender branches with leaves that were narrow, oval-shaped, tapering to a point, floated in the water and washed up near our ship. I was able to reach a branch, and when I pulled it from the water, I realized that I was holding a willow branch. I was overcome with joy. It's a miracle, I shouted, and this new place God has provided me with the willow branch so that I may fulfill the mitzvah of Hoshana Rabbah. I waved it enthusiastically toward the Pinta. Alonso de la Cour responded by waving his willow branch also. That night, the night of Hoshana Rabbah, all the sailors slept peacefully. The crescent of the moon sparkled gloriously on the water while I sat all night with Rodrigo de Tirana, reciting to him the Psalms, as is the custom on this night. From a Spanish translation we read together by the light of the moon. O give thanks unto the Lord, for he is good, for his mercy endureth forever. So let the redeemed of the Lord say, whom he has redeemed from the hand of the adversary. Then were they glad because they were quiet, and he led them unto their desired haven. We beseech you, O Lord, save us now, Hoshana. With the first flickering light, we who had been awake all night were the first ones to see land. It was not a dream, it was not a vision. Rodrigo ran to alert Columbus that he had sighted land. The excitement and the hysterical screams awakened all the sailors on our ship and on the other two ships. They began to sing and dance to a new song, Land, Land, Land. We disembarked on the beach at Ferdinand Bay, San Salvador, and took possession of a new world for Spain. Columbus always believed that this island and the other ones he sighted later on the voyage of discovery were the Indies, near Japan or China. And I, Joseph Ben Alevi Ha'ivri, sang with my friends with Alessandro de la Cour, Chan Cabirde, Rodrigo Girano, Don Rodriguez, Don Gabriel Sanchez, Dr. Baranol, and Dr. Marco, a different song, a song of thanksgiving to God for leading us to a place where we might publicly acknowledge our Judaism. Well, that's a very interesting idea of an excerpt from a diary, and surely this doesn't answer us about Columbus. In a certain sense, it seems from this excerpt that Columbus didn't know too much about Judaism. But still, there were people on the boat, like I said before, that definitely were Jewish, and of course their motive was to find a new safe haven for the Jewish people in the New World. So therefore we see it, I mean, like I say, I don't know if it changes too much or not. Say Columbus was Jewish, and now you know that for sure that, and I think history also say that there were Jewish people on the boat. But in any case, that, like I say, that took about 300 years later I mean, there was always Jewish people here, I'm not saying, but at least to be a safe haven for the Jewish people with the major numbers. And actually, the truth is, since after World War II, America happens to be the biggest, United States of America has the biggest population of Jewish people in the entire world, and that, of course, is including Israel. So, lo and behold, it took about 300-400 years until there was a safe haven for the Jewish people. Not to say it started after World War II. We talked about it many points, many times before about that. The Jewish people have been part of America all the way from the beginning, as we see here, and surely fought with the American colonies in the Revolutionary War. It's not for now to go into all the details, and also in all the other subsequent wars, and we're faithful Americans and loyal Americans. And it's just like I say, the major numbers came in the middle 1800s till the majority of the Jewish people, because of course the majority of people were in America after Europe lost 6 million Jews, so that made us the #1 country with the Jewish population. So that's interesting to note, and can't really get into all the Jewish history of America. It's a long and deep subject. It doesn't have the time for us right now, of course, and then we'll have to leave it for a few other sessions. But we wanted to at least talk a little bit about how at least it started right from the beginning. You can't get it, well, people want to say the Indians, but I'll have to get in some other intriguing session here at the Jewish View TV show, and that is that many people say, And again, I'm not postulating any theories. People throw it out, and I'm just presenting to you to chew it over, that the American Indians were part of the 10 lost tribes. And they come up again with a few theories to say that was so. Again, I'm not, like I say, putting my stamp of approval on any of these theories. I'm not a historian, and I didn't do the research. But I'm just, like I say, giving over to you. People tell me, and they have some interesting observations, and that's what we're here for, to throw out some interesting ideas and let you make your final decision. But that's very interesting. We'll have to devote another show to the idea that the American Indians could be part of the 10 lost tribes. So as I was saying, if Columbus didn't have a few Jews on his ship, then even maybe the American Indians, which were here before Columbus, were really the first Jewish people in America. But that the 10 lost tribes is a very interesting subject, which we talked about it once before, and nobody really knows exactly where they are. I guess we'll have to wait for the Messiah's time to figure that out. Many people, even the Irish people, say that the Irish people are from the 10 lost tribes. There's a lot of it. I heard actually now, I think about it, the Japanese were. So many people want to be the 10 lost tribes, and who knows, maybe it's the truth also. I don't know myself. It's interesting to ponder, and who knows, let's say, there's a lot of truth in rumors, the Talmud says, so maybe there was some truth to that also. Or surely we're Jewish people all in the far-flung corners of the world. Like I said before, there were Jewish communities in China. Jewish communities really everywhere. And therefore, I know I'm going away from traveling, but we're talking about traveling, Columbus's travels from Spain, of course, to the Caribbean. He maybe went there for a good vacation over here. A lot of people there go for vacations. But now I'm just going to bring up to you that we're going to bring up to the modern day that people still do traveling. Maybe they're not going so much on boats and they go on airplanes more. But I just want to see that different places. Columbus went to the West Indies where there weren't too many Jews, or if there were Jews, there weren't too many kosher restaurants. But nowadays we're in the modern world. People go by plane. People go everywhere. But still, there's availability for Jewish people to travel also, and of course keep kosher. And we'll just bring out one interesting place is, of course, kosher food now available at Disney World. Well, Disney World really isn't too far of a place where Columbus landed, is it, down there in Florida? So we have to look at it this way. Disney World is justifiably the most popular man-made vacation and tourist destination on Earth. Now it's even better with the availability of kosher foods on the Disney grounds and nearby. Observant travelers can have their pick of their full-service restaurants at the on-site Disney resorts and each of the 3 theme parks, the Magic Kingdom, Epcot Center, and Disney MGM Studios. Just call at least 24 hours in advance to place your order. You'll be served a complete hot glad kosher meal in style, choice of beef, chicken, or fish. Each meal is accompanied by a fruit appetizer, vegetable, a starch, and dessert. Beverages are extra. Meals are prepared by Wilton in New York under the OU Union of Orthodox supervision. So we just want to bring out to you that not only can you reach, well, I know that's not exactly where Columbus landed, but kind of close. It's not warm also. And now you can actually go back to Spain also, even go back to where Columbus came from. It says scheduled for later in this year in Toledo and Jerusalem is the historic By My Spirit commemorative gathering which invites people from all over the world to participate in a profound act of reconciliation which will carry an inspirational message of peace and friendship throughout the universe. Originated by an international group of young Jewish leaders, the event will draw thousands of Jews and non-Jews will converge on Toledo. That's Spain, not Toledo, Ohio. Spanish dignitaries, government officials, and international Jewish leaders will be welcomed by the mayor of Toledo in the main plaza at the opening ceremony. Following will be a catalogue of cultural events, including candlelight performance by the Israeli Philharmonic Orchestra, conducted by Zubin Mehta and featuring Placido Domingo and Isaac Stern. Kaddish, led by Chief Rabbi of France, Joseph Sitruk, will be recited in memory of the exiled Sephardim, and as the evening draws to a close, the torch will be lit to seal a pact of friendship between the Jewish and Spanish people. From there, the commemoration continues on to Jerusalem, where a closing ceremony will be conducted at the Western Wall, featuring Israeli composer Noam Sharif's dramatic revival of the dead, performed by the Rishon LeZion Symphony Orchestra, which includes many Russian immigrant musicians. The ceremonies will conclude with the sound of 200 shofars echoing through the streets of Jerusalem in praise of God in His sanctuary. Hallelujah. So this is interesting. There's interesting traveling. We can go, like I said, maybe not close to the Caribbean. It's not exactly, but it's Florida. You can get kosher meals there. A Jewish person can travel now, obviously a little bit easier than Columbus traveled. But it's interesting to go back, and there's many times at these historical trips. So we talked about one at Spain. Of course, this year Spain is anyway on the world scene because of the Columbus story, of course. And people are going there in Spain and seeing what's happening. And maybe, I mean, it's very interesting. People don't talk about Spain that much because I guess maybe it's a third-rate country nowadays. But on the other hand, it really was one of the greatest empires in its own time. And it surely has a lot to do with the roots of America. So many people are tracing back the roots and seeing what Spain is really all about. And going back there and of course, connecting it to Israel, which is the homeland of the Jewish people, and Jewish people always remember that. And it really is, no matter where people travel, there's some either Jewish influence or just Jewish history, and it's important for everybody to recognize, to understand it, and it's just an interesting, and I hope you enjoyed it also. I'll peek a little bit into history with a little different perspective and the Jewish roots of Christopher Columbus. Thank you very much. Shalom, welcome to the Jewish View. My name is Rabbi Nachman Simon with the Delmar Chabad Center, and today we have a few thoughts from the Lubavitcher Rebbe. Many times people hear about that Lubavitch is a leader, and he is called the Lubavitcher Rebbe, Rabbi Schneerson, and he is a very interesting rabbinical leader, but today we would like to actually focus in on the Rebbe's ideas of science and Judaism. Now, of course, being that he's a leader of Judaism, obviously he knows a lot about the Torah and Judaism, but besides this, the Rebbe has degrees from the Sorbonne and University of Berlin. So therefore, in engineering, in scientific materials, so therefore, he is well acquainted with scientific works. Now, many times people have the question, how can we parallel the difference between science and Torah? For example, and this is the question we're going to deal with now, science says that the world is, what the latest is, billions of years old. And Torah says, well, it's over 5,700 and some years old. That's a big difference. How can we equate the two? So here we're going to deal with how the Rebbe wrote to somebody a letter. We're going to read it. How we can verify the scientific ideas and how do they conflict with the Torah idea of creation. So, without further ado, this letter was actually written a number of years ago. And the Rebbe writes a letter, greetings and blessings. After not hearing from you for a long time, I was pleased to receive regard from you through the young men of Chabad who visited your community recently in connection with the public lecture. I was gratified to hear that you participated in the discussion, but it was quite a surprise to me to learn that you are still troubled by the problem of the age of the world, as suggested by the various scientific theories which cannot be reconciled with the Torah view that the world is 5,700 and at that time was 22 years old. I underline the word theories, for it is necessary to bear in mind, first of all, that science formulates and deals with theories and hypotheses, while the Torah deals with absolute truths. There are two different disciplines where reconciliation is entirely out of place. It was especially surprising to me that according to the report, the said problem is bothering you to the extent that it has trespassed